You're listening to The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey.
You have 3 takeaways in Fearvana, the big ones there. Can you walk me through what they are? So all of our Upgrade Collective listeners and all just listeners in general can walk away from this. All right, what do I need to know? And maybe you guys want to read Fearvana, maybe you don't, but let's get you the main points there.
Sure. Yeah. So number 1 is that fear is not the antithesis of nirvana. Fear is the access point to it. So how do we make this actionable, right? Like fundamentally is to stop demonizing fear and any emotion. You'll often hear, the biggest self-help guys in the world will say how to overcome anxiety, how to, stop, be fearless, don't be scared, let go of all that. When any emotion shows up, accept it for its isness, let go of the judgment. Once you accept it and let go of the judgment around it, then can you do something about it? And when you engage fear, I always like to say that fear propels you to prepare. So as an example, I was terrified of writing a book on fear, kind of ironically, right? But I was terrified you've written books, it's scary. Like you're putting yourself out there. What if people hate you? What if people think you're stupid? What if you get that dreaded 1-star review on Amazon? All that kind of stuff, right? So I was scared, but because I was scared, I wrote down and literally do this exercise, write this down. What am I scared of? Why am I scared? What's the worst case scenario? What can I do to prepare for the worst case scenario? So because I was scared of writing a bad book, I studied from authors like Jack Canfield, the Chicken Soup for the Soul author, and I studied how do you write a better book? And because I did that, I must have trashed 100,000 words of work, 100,000 words worth of work, but I ended up writing a book that was worthy of being endorsed by the Dalai Lama and one I'm truly proud of now that I know it's making an impact, So engage the fear, use it, stop demonizing it, and then use it as fuel to drive you forward. And also ways to sort of practically apply that is, what's the why on the other side? Why do you want to do that? What's the thing that scares you? What's the why behind it? Knowing the reward on the other side of it. Also engaging the flip side of fear, like fear of consequences. Like for me, I literally sat down and visualized myself dying. What if I die never having shared my message with the world? And that was scarier to me than the fear of writing a book. So you weigh those fears and this one's much scarier. I'm going to write my book, right? So engaging the fear in that way.
That's powerful, man. So yeah, you're afraid of this, you're afraid of that. Which one's worse? Man, if only we could have politicians.
Right?
What am I more afraid of? Millions of people with pitchforks? Or not getting paid by a large company? No, oh, sorry, I didn't say that. I apologize if that was inappropriate.
Love it.
To be very clear, I'm opposed to pitchforks in any form. I just kind of sort of see that that's the direction things may be heading, and I would like it to not go there.
I can relate.
Yeah. But I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, it's either going to happen or it's not going to happen, right?
Yeah. And that's why kind of engaging the flip side of those fears, and the fear of death, I think, is the most powerful one. Anytime you're engaging a fear, access death. And what I mean by accessing death, on the one hand, you can literally confront it where you could actually die, like the things that I do. But on the other hand, you can do death meditations. Like I do monthly death meditations, and in Buddhism, they practice meditating on death. And that brings you closer to death. And then when you do that, it will bring you into a heightened awareness to life. And so the fear of death is a constant fear that drives me into living a more fulfilling life. So that's a kind of way to weigh those fears. So that's sort of takeaway number 1 with some practical applications is that fear is not the antithesis of nirvana, but the access point to it. The second one is the disidentification, that there's no self to find, there's only a self to create. So this is kind of what we touched on, is allowing yourself to separate from what is and and the way to start doing that is it's a simple practice of awareness. Like as you're standing in the line for the store somewhere, what am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? So simply by becoming aware of what is, you can start recognizing that these things are there, but you are not those things. So for example, last weekend, I did a 2-hour meditation. Sitting cross-legged for 2 hours, your legs start to hurt. And I would literally say to myself in my mind, I'm not my body. And by acknowledging that I'm not my body, the pain would disappear. And if only for a moment, it would return, but inevitably the cycle would sort of continue, right? So start recognizing start separating yourself from not only yourself, but from everything around you. Meaning that everything we see is a construct, right? All of life is not, we don't engage with life as it is. We engage with our lens of life. So if you simplistically, if you're wearing red glasses, the whole world looks red. We all have, and these constructs are our beliefs, our mental models, and everything. As an example, when I look at that door and I see it's gray, what makes that door gray? Because I've been taught from a young age that color is gray. But there's something between the pure isness of what that is and my construct that I've attached to it, right? And it's hard to, you can't really quantify that. You can't describe it, because by talking about it, by applying words to it, you're kind of conceptualizing a thought and therefore inevitably applying a construct to it. But when you practice accepting the constructs of things, whether they be external and internal, you can start seeing them as a construct, acknowledge that reality isn't inherently real. And then when you see that reality isn't inherently real, you can ultimately create your own reality. So
Yep.
that's I would say kind of the core of it is acknowledging the inherent like constructs of reality, so you can create your own one. And then, which leads me to the third takeaway, is this kind of thing again that I was touching on singular dualism, that the idea that contrast is what gives life its flavor. Contrast gives life its flavor. You cannot have summits without valleys. You cannot have highs without lows. You cannot have light without darkness. So play on those edges. Like, the biggest flaw, I believe, in mental health is the idea that mental well-being is this state without tension. It's a state with harmony. It's a state of equilibrium.
Mm-hmm. It's like you can't have good without pharmaceutical companies.
Nice. Exactly. You need the...
I'm just trying to make sure I understand your point.
Exactly. Well put. Better than I could put it. Exactly. But like the way for an individual to apply that is to go play on those edges, like create what I call deliberate disequilibrium. Go play in, if you're comfortable with pleasure, seek out pain, and war is an example of this. Like the most profound example of this is in Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about how there were people in a concentration camp who would, and these, they're starving, tortured, cold, like experiencing the horrors, the darkness of humanity that no human being should ever experience. And they would walk around giving away their last piece of bread to somebody else. I mean, the courage in that, the humanity in that is unfathomable. And why I bring that up is to say that this experience of absolute darkness and evil reveals, paradoxically reveals the absolute light and good. And so when you experience, and hence the, singular dualism, when you play on those edges, you start to experience the true flavor that is this life. You experience life, the adventure that it is, for all its worth. And that's, if we look at like ultimately what are we seeking? We're seeking, I call it like neurological bliss. So this is sort of the neurochemicals of bliss, and spiritual bliss. This is fulfillment, happiness, inner peace, whatever word you want to use to call that. And if you look at how we feel that, you got to experience the edge of life. You got to know the summits and the valleys, and you can find beauty in all of it. Like, to recognize that happiness is not the elimination of sadness. Happiness is the ability to find the gift in sadness. So you will find sadness, but that's okay. That's part of it. And so at the core of that, when we bring it all back, you have to, and coming back to lesson number 1 about fear not being the antithesis of nirvana, is to accept that suffering is not the enemy. Such fear, stress, anxiety, pain, suffering, diversity. Often when I do speeches, I'll show these words. And wherever I do this in the world, you can ask people, do you think of this as positive or negative? Nobody hears these words and thinks of them as positive. That's the core of it. Like, the demonization of suffering is the foundational problem. When you can start falling in love with these words, these emotions, these experiences, like when I hear suffering, like one of my core mantras, actually wearing a shirt that says it, is suffer well, suffer well, like the paradoxical nature of that, right? Like falling in love with that from there becomes the foundation where you can do all these other things. So sort of to summarize, because I know I went long there, but embracing suffering, the disidentification of the self so you can create whoever you want to be, and embracing contrast, embracing the polarities of life so you can experience the adventure that it really is.